All right, today we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the most popular programming languages in the world, Python. So whether you've always been curious about why it's so big, or maybe you're thinking about dipping your toes into coding, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get started.
So, when you hear the word Python, what's the first thing that pops into your head? If you're picturing a giant snake, well, you're not alone. But in the world of technology, Python means something completely different.
Believe it or not, the name has absolutely nothing to do with snakes. The creator of Python, a programmer named Guido van Rossum, was a huge fan of the BBC comedy show Monty Python's Flying Circus. He wanted a name that was short, unique, and just a little bit mysterious, so he chose Python. That whole snake logo thing, yeah, that came way, way later. Okay, so if it's not a snake, what in the world is Python? The best way to think about Python is like a Swiss Army knife for programmers. It's this incredibly versatile tool that can be used for just about anything, and that's a huge part of its appeal. Now, for the official definition, Python is a high-level, object-oriented programming language. High-level just means its syntax is closer to human language, which makes it easier to write. And object-oriented is a fancy way of saying it organizes code around data and objects, which helps in building complex applications. But the main goal, the real philosophy behind it, is simple. The code should always be clear and easy to read. Let's just quickly jump in a time machine. Guido van Rossum started working on Python way back in the late 1980s, and the very first version was released to the public in 1991. From those humble beginnings, it has grown into a global powerhouse used by everyone from Google to NASA. Which, of course, brings us to the biggest question of all: why? How did this language named after a comedy show become so dominant? Well, it's not just one thing. It's a powerful combination of a few key factors. To really understand Python's power, you just need to look at this one number: over 1.3 million. That's the estimated number of libraries and packages available in Python, a massive universe of pre-written code for almost any task you can possibly imagine. Python's success really rests on three pillars. First, it's easy to learn. Its syntax reads a lot like plain English. Second, it has a massive community of developers who are constantly helping each other out. And third, as we just saw, it has vast libraries for pretty much any task. For example, with a library called TensorFlow, you can build incredibly complex artificial intelligence models. Okay, so we know what Python is and why it's so popular, but how does it actually work? How does the code you write, the stuff you save in a .py file, actually tell your computer to do things? Let's take a look at the magic happening behind the scenes. It's basically a three-step journey. First, you have your source code, the Python commands you write. When you run it, the Python compiler translates it, not directly into machine code, but into an intermediate language called bytecode. This bytecode is then fed to something called the Python virtual machine, or PVM, which finally translates it into the binary zeros and ones that your computer's processor can execute. This whole process is what makes Python so flexible across different operating systems. Now, before you can start writing any code, you have to understand a few basic concepts. Think of these as the fundamental building blocks of any program, no matter how big or small. The most fundamental building block in any code is the variable. The easiest way to think about a variable is as a labeled box or a container. You give it a name and you put some data inside it to use later. It's how programs remember information. So, what kind of data can you put in these boxes? Well, there are lots of types, but the most common ones are integers, which are just whole numbers, strings, which is text, and booleans, which can only ever be true or false. In these examples, A, B, and C are the variable names. They're the labels on our boxes. Okay, so you've stored data in a variable, but how do you actually see what's inside? For that, you use the print function. Think of it like a Xerox machine. Whatever you put inside its parentheses gets copied and displayed on the screen. It's your window into what your program is doing. We've covered the what, the why, and the how of Python. So what's your next step? Where do you go from here to start your own journey? So what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's that Python is a powerful language, it's backed by a huge community, and most importantly, it was designed to be accessible for beginners. It's a language that invites you in. And this brings us to one last crucial question. From automating small tasks and analyzing data to building websites and creating artificial intelligence, the possibilities are practically endless. So, what will you build with Python?